Well, I appreciate you for allowing me here at your farm today
No, thank
and
you.
coming and interviewing you. Um, Wait for the plane to pass for a
Yeah,
second.
yeah.
But what you're doing here is amazing. I know you do a lot of cultural awareness with your radio station, and you have a farm, a lot of land
Hmm.
conservation, and a lot of different projects going on.
Yeah.
Um, so I appreciate you meeting me here today. If you want to give an introduction, that would be nice.
Well, first, I want to thank you, your family, and for coming out. I think we really appreciate it. It means a lot. So thank you. So I'm Omeat, and it's been a work of my life. I think now 30 plus years working on doing as much as I can. Uh, Started with political organizations. I joined an organization about in like 1997, 96, called the Mexica Movement. And they were an organization I was happy to be a part of, and kind of political awareness, cultural awareness. Um, they were they instilled a lot of discipline. So, but through the process, it was agriculture, astronomy, architecture, but always with a land base. Kind of trying to figure how to preserve our lands and get our lands back. And so being what they call undocumented made that part a little bit more difficult for me. But it was just a bump. It was just another hurdle just to get over, and then you know managed to do it with a group of families. We came together and purchased land as a community to create sustainable living, and get more people interested in alternative ways of regaining our identity and who we are, um, and kind of steer away, not because of against, but just as to create different models of steer away from the nonprofit sector, and how could we do things autonomously, as a people, with our own effort, with our own work, without grants or loans or nonprofits, or because of the situation we were in of being undocumented. We couldn't get grants, we couldn't get loans, we couldn't get a bank, we couldn't get a driver's license, social security numbers, no. So all we were left with was our own abilities. So we all came together and said, we could do this. And that's kind of what led to it. So
So, what age did you come over undocumented?
5 years old.
Okay.
Yeah, I was 5 years old. And,
What was that journey like?
you know, what I remember, yeah, I was 5 years old. Honestly, I didn't know what was going on at the time. I just remember leaving the little town I was from. I had never seen a car. I had never seen. I remember the first time I saw a car, and I was like, "What the heck is this thing?" And I saw a person inside of it. I was like, "What?" It was just. I just remember it was very shocking to me to see a car, but I didn't know what it was. So the journey was just, all right, we're leaving, and you're 5 years old. You don't know where you're going. You don't. They just adults are just taking you. You know, and crossing what I think is the Rio Colorado in Texas, New Mexico area, because, and the reason I think it was that river is because I remember just my feet getting wet from my knees down,
Mm-hmm.
and I imagine, and I was on my mom's shoulders, so the water must have been like almost neck high to her, and I was on her shoulders, and so I couldn't swim, so
She must be pretty badass.
yeah, she must. Yeah, she was, man. She was a tough lady. And then next thing you know, I'm living in East LA. You know, this big city, coming from a ranch. A little town of, not even a town. It was just a few houses in the middle of the Michoacan kind of landscape. And then next thing you know, I'm living in East LA, cars and freeways, and it was just a big shock.
Hmm.
So, and then when I was 7, we moved up north to the San Joaquin Valley, Fresno area, and I went to work with my mom. So picking grapes and pepinos and all this stuff, right? And immigration used to show up, and the cops would show up, and we'd be getting like pe- um, pesticide sprayed while we were picking. And it's most people think it's a liquid, but it's a powder. And so you come out with this white powder all over you of the pesticides that they would spray on you. And
They're spraying it while you're picking.
while we're picking, yeah.
Oh my gosh.
And then the UFW would show up, and they would call immigration on us. So UFW would call the cops. They'd call immigration because they're an American union to protect American jobs. So the undocumented had no choice but to cross their picket lines, right? And we couldn't be part of their unions either. So, and it's well documented, that the UFW were never for the undocumented, at least not then.
UFW, that's the United Farm Workers.
United Farm Workers, who Cesar Chavez was part of, or was one of the leaders in, and along with Dolores Huerta. But they persecuted undocumented people all the time. I was there, and we'd run. Like we saw the UFW, we were more scared of them than the cops, because they were our people, So
Why do you think they were so hostile against immigrants?
well, it's because they're an American union organization, so to protect American jobs. So the undocumented were taking, quote unquote, the same language
Like
you
in
hear
South
today.
South Park, they're like dictator.
Yeah.
That's that's the UFW.
Yeah, it's like that.
Okay.
Yeah. So and so it was tough, and my mom died of valley fever, which is something that a lot of people that are working in the fields get. So I'd go to school sometimes, and then sometimes I wouldn't because I had to go work with my mom to make enough money. She's a mom with 6 kids, so I was the oldest. At the time, we had 4 kids. She had 4 kids, and she ended up dying from valley fever when I was 11, and she left behind 6 kids. My sister and I, who had a different father, we came to live here back to East LA. And my other 4 siblings, their dad picked them up and moved them to the Bay Area. And then about 7 years passed, I didn't see my siblings. So, but when we moved here, we moved in the 90s, 1991. It was the peak of the violence and everything that was happening all over East LA, Boyle Heights. And I started thinking this can't be a coincidence that up there we're being exploited, down here we're being exploited. This has to be systematic. There's no way this is a coincidence. Like everywhere I go, my community is being taken advantage of, exploited, persecuted, ignored.
And when you're talking about my community, are you saying specifically in the indigenous community that is migrating, or just brown people in general?
Brown people in general, because that's what I saw. Then it was just like all brown people. It didn't. So there was no real distinction between, Central Americans, Peruvians, Mexicans. It was just like I just saw it endemic to our communities.
Right now, we can know now based off of statistics that most of these migrants are indigenous people.
Yes,
but
exactly.
back then we're not seeing that.
Right.
And then a lot of the people, when they see immigrants come in, they're not even distinct in one from another.
Yep. And
Yeah.
a lot of times, just like a lot of communities that come into a society in which they don't have the upper hand in language and societal norms and all that, they then adapt themselves to the dominant culture, right? So the abandonment of traditional ways, the abandonment of the language and all these things. So kind of to survive, right? And so the majority of the people that come here to, they leave for us and for a lot of people. A lot of times migrants leave where they're from to the place that created the problem of why they left, right? So during Reagan and everything that they were doing, the Contras and the NAFTA and all those things that were happening at the time created.
Would you be able to go in a little bit deeper on the Reagan thing?
Yeah, so so Reagan, he started a big program, and along with the Schools of the Americas here in the U.S., they were training paramilitaries to fight a lot of the native communities, and even overall the society in general in the Spanish-speaking countries, in order to attain the resources and political power of the area. So Reagan. Along with a bunch of other stuff that he did, with the Fair Trade Act, with the North American Fair Trade Act, which is NAFTA, installing corporations and maquiladoras all over Mexico and Central America for cheap labor and all of that, created a problem of poverty because they were leeching the labor, but all the profits were coming back to the U.S. and created these systems of poverty in the Spanish-speaking countries.
So NAFTA was a program. Is that the program that allowed people to come over temporarily on work visas to work the fields, and then they would go back home?
That was kind of part of it. So people were still coming in thousands, regardless of permission or not. Right? The U.S. has always had work visa programs. But therein is also the problem, right? Like why do native people need permission to do what they've always done for thousands of years, which is just migrate, right? So there's a difference between being an immigrant and being a migrant. Immigrant implies you're going to a nation that is not yours, but a migrant is someone who travels as they please, which is what we've done, as native people. So, and it's evident going back to all the trade routes from, Ohio, Cahokia, Chaco Canyon, all those areas, all the way down to Central America. So the process of migration has always been part of indigenous cultures, and we're just doing what we've always done, except now there's borders that keep us from doing all these things. Right? So when Reagan started doing all that and created the problems in Guatemala and El Salvador, Nicaragua, and all those areas, installing puppets, and which also then gave rise to the Zapatistas and various other groups, the EZLN, to fight back against imperialism and colonialism, modern colonialism. So there's always been some sort of resistance, and then what Reagan. So all these people, these kids that grew up in those times, are adults now. And a few years ago, 5-7 years ago, there was another big migration, kind of people leaving Nicaragua and all those areas. And all those are now adults that were there in the 80s. And they're like, leaving the poverty, leaving that the U.S. created through all these programs. So it's a problems that the U.S. created, that now the ones that were children then, that are adults now, are now reaping the poverty of what happened back then.
Right? Yeah, and a lot of that was the CIA going in and creating, having drugs being created there. They're funneling it into these communities down here in LA, and they're using that to fund the other wars that they're starting in other countries just to replace the government.
Yeah, and it's now with fentanyl being a big kind of newer quote unquote drug. Mexico is now the largest producer of fentanyl, so now that's being imported into the U.S. So it's the same recipe being kind of reintroduced, the same recipe, societal recipe, and a system of capitalism to create more systems of oppression. And so you see now, like Trump, for example. When Trump was in office, build a wall, all this stuff, right? Well, what did AMLO do? AMLO militarized the border between Guatemala and Mexico. So now Trump didn't have to build a border anymore. AMLO did it for him. So now,
That was the previous president.
no, AMLO's the president now, the Mexican president.
I thought they just switched over to a new president, or she hasn't taken.
She hasn't taken office yet.
Okay.
Yeah. So Trump didn't have to physically build a wall anymore. So that whole idea got scrapped because Trump basically threatened AMLO and said, like, look, if you don't do this, we're going to pull out all this money. We're going to do it. So AMLO, with his whole supposed indigeneity for indigenous, did that, started the mega projects like the Tren Maya that displaces thousands and thousands of indigenous people, destroys hundreds and hundreds of archaeological sites, like complete disregard for Mother Earth and all the destruction that the bullet train is putting, that's going on around Mexico. So trying to create a Dubai-like tourism to bring in foreign money into Mexico with these mega projects, right? So the big airport that they plan to put, the big dam that they plan to put. So all these things, and with the disguise of we're working with indigenous people, but in reality, they create programs that are not for indigenous people. Sure, they create immediate jobs. Like immediately, 5 years, everybody's got a job. 10 years from now, once AMLO's dead and gone, the disparity that it's going to create, and the models are there, you know.
So how does this create disparity specifically for indigenous communities? Because I know the way you're describing it, outside looking in without the indigenous perspective in mind, these sound like good things for Mexico, as far as creating and raising the GDP and building up the infrastructure. These sound like positive things for a country. So how do those things specifically displace the indigenous community?
Exactly what you just said, the GDP. So it benefits the 1%, just like mega projects always do. In Dubai, like you take Dubai, for example, they import labor, you know, from India, from Pakistan, all those areas to build, but the workers, they all live still in very bad conditions in Saudi Arabia. So in Mexico, it's the same thing. It'll benefit, if you have a stop, like every 50 miles of a train, it benefits that local area of every 50 miles. But in between the eco destruction that it does and what it's done to the aquifers, to everything that they're doing, has long-term effects that in between all the small villages and towns are the ones that are not benefiting from all of that.
Okay, yeah, right. So they're not receiving any of the wealth benefits,
no, they can.
But their local forests where they go and get food, or their water sources are now being disrupted. Yes. So now they're having food scarcity without even the benefit of the wealth to buy it at this point.
As it is, and now on top of that, I'm glad you brought up the wealth to buy. There is a program that was created by Lázaro Cárdenas in the early part of the 19th century, which is a system created by the Mexica, which are the Aztecs, that divides land to the people based on usage, right? So, for example, they still have them now. So now, if you're a Mexican citizen, you have the right to land, no matter what. But the government says, all right, you have this many acres, you can use this land for the rest of your life and forever. No taxes, nothing. But if you stop using it for 7 years, you have to give it up and give it to somebody else.
That sounds exactly like what they did to the native communities through the Dawes Act in America, where they couldn't overtake us, so they signed treaties assigning land to specific native groups in different areas. But with the Dawes Act, what they did is, if the land that was given to those native groups, if they didn't break it up into plots and give each native that's a part of that land a plot, then whatever land was not assigned to a native were now allowed to be settled by non-natives, even if those lands fell within their treaty lines. And that's how they slowly broke more and more land away from us.
Right.
And it was under the guise of, oh, you're not using that land.
Yeah.
Which is crazy to us natives, because we're like, what do you mean? We just don't own land. We don't divvy it up that way. Right. We might all live in one central community, but we're going out, we're taking care of the land.
So that's kind of, in the system, there's called ejido. So, and this system goes back prior 1492. So before, just how do you have a city like Mexico City at the time, Tenochtitlan, of 350,000 people, right? How do you how do you give 350,000 people like access to land, right? Back then. So when Lázaro Cárdenas created this program, and now they're trying to get rid of it. So Salinas de Gortari, which was the president 4 terms ago in Mexico, started getting rid of the Ejido program, and which now creates a privatization of the land. So because you brought up earlier of the Tren Maya, now the people don't even have access to ejidos. So now they could privatize all that land that originally belongs to the Mexican people, right? And at that point, it's not a matter in this structure. It's not a matter of indigeneity. It's not. It's the human right to have access to land.
Yeah.
So with the undoing of the ejidos, and which is part of the fighting of the EZLN, the EZLN, the Ejército Zapatista de Liberación Nacional, was founded specifically for that because Salinas de Gortari at the time was undoing the ejido system. And the Mayan people of Chiapas, they based their entire system of agriculture on the access to land, no matter what. And now that was being threatened. So organizations were started in order to fight back, right? So the EZLN took up arms against the Mexican government, winning the keeping of their lands. So that's a lot of the source in terms of land, but it's so easy under the disguise of smoke and theatrics. You know, like when AMLO became president, you get a couple people dressed like native people up on stage in the middle of Mexico City with all the cameras, and they're passing smoke, and all of a sudden he's for indigenous culture, right? But we've seen that, right? We've seen the theatrics, you know, and that's kind of what was going on with AMLO. Now the new person who's taken over, she's completely on the same boat, right, as AMLO. And so you have these issues there, you have similar issues here. So when people come here, a lot of us turn to agriculture. You know, a lot of people that come from the South.
Well, it seems like you'll have a bigger issue with the new president coming in because her biggest funders are BlackRock. She has ties to BlackRock, which are the asset holding companies that are wreaking havoc through corporations all over the world. And so from what it sounds like with the infrastructure and the future plans for Mexico, they have a big part in that. And labor is still fairly cheap there. And from what I've seen, a lot of like assembling companies are going to move from China over to Mexico, which could be a good thing for factory and labor workers. But we'll see, I guess.
And I think that's it depends. You know, you could look at it. There's one on the one hand, you're on the economics and social well-being of the people, meaning that, you know, more labor, more work, and all that means more money and all that. But it also means deeper immersion into capitalism, deeper immersion into a system. Colonization. You know, the erasure of indigenous cultures. You know, that's what capitalism's founded on erasure. It's founded on slavery, founded on removal of indigenous people and resources. That's what funds capitalism, both socially, economically, and historically. You know, I mean funding. When you fund history and the outcome of history and the way books are written and history is written, you and I both know, you know, like American history is written by the European colonizers. You know, it's like we have to do the research to rewrite our own history, you know, whereas theirs is the predominant idea, and that's what we get taught in schools, right?
Well, our culture is kind of the opposite of capitalism, because we live in communities where we're helping each other take care of each other. We're living off the land. We're taking care of the land. We're taking care of the animals around us. We're only taking what we need, nothing more. And we're also not going into other people's lands and communities and taking their resources because we don't need it. We have what we need in our communities. And so capitalism is the opposite mindset, where it's just take as much as you can and keep it all for yourself.
And that's that's the difference in, I guess, yeah, like it does create, this Tren Maya. Yeah, it creates jobs for 4 or 5 years. Sure. And then people have a means to eat and all of that. But the long term effects is part of the formula of capitalism is to create a system where is think of yourself, right? So that's what a lot of these folks are doing. They're thinking of their right to live and their immediate survival. Completely understandable. Like you can't knock people for like, damn, they're giving me a job. I gotta eat, otherwise I can't find work. Like that's a really hard argument to make, or to make against that. Like, no, you don't. You shouldn't go feed your family. You shouldn't participate in it. If that's all there is, it's really hard to convince others outside of that. So this is why I understand the economic and social argument to it.
But your fight is more so, sounds like, educating people about their culture and then bringing them to that aspect of it. Well, obviously, we can't get away from, you need a job, right? You need to take care of your family, and this world is built on the American dollar, so we have to partake in that system. But it sounds like you are more so trying to lead them back to the indigenous way of thinking.
I think it's one thing to participate in capitalism. It's another to be a capitalist, right? So we all partake. We put gas. We pay electricity, rent, mortgages, whatever it is. But it's another thing to be a capitalist and use that to capitalize off of others, right? So if you have a business, that your business helps fund things that are indigenous focused, right? If you I don't know, like whatever we can do, even if it's at a small scale, that we find ways of turning the mindset, and really think about generations to come, because if we just think of our survival, I'm afraid that our culture, along with all indigenous cultures, I think it's important that all indigenous cultures survive. From Indonesia to Australia, New Zealand, like it's so important because that's where our values lie. That's where our ways of interacting with Mother Earth, our ways of education, of food, of all these things, they're still embedded in indigenous cultures. But capitalism is on a mission to destroy all of it. And you see it in Africa, South America, you see it here, Mexico, like you see it everywhere now, where indigenous cultures are slowly disappearing and being absorbed by capitalism. And now there's, like capitalism in a lot of ways has infiltrated indigenous cultures too, where there's social capital, where you get capitalize on how many likes or how native you look, or all these things. So now there's a social capital to how native one can be. Oh, he's more native than that one, or like you see that all the time. Like, and that's social capital. So it's not, capitalism is not just money. There's emotional capitalism, where you take advantage of somebody else's disparities or weaknesses, or like, oh, their vulnerabilities and all those things. So there's emotional capitalism, social capitalism. There's all kinds of capitalism. So that monetary system has now penetrated the overall psychology of how we behave as people, and not just us, all over the world, right? Like there's people in Africa that grow chocolate their entire lives and have never tasted chocolate. They grow the plant. They have no idea what the end result. They never tasted a chocolate bar at the end of the product. They're just working for 2 cents an hour, and that's what they do for Mars, Snickers, or whoever, and they've never actually tasted chocolate.
Well, but the cacao is very sacred to them at the same time,
yeah,
and they're using it for ceremonial purposes.
Well, in Africa, like 98% of the chocolate of the world is grown there now, and it's native to here, right? So that tells you capitalism has shifted it there to make the most amount of money because the labor is so cheap.
And it's not traditional to their teaching, so it's not sacred to them in the same way.
Yeah. So that's kind of the, there's a lot of examples like that, and I think,
yeah, a lot of indigenous identity is tied to the land.
Yeah.
Well, also our spirituality and our ceremonies. That's the deeper aspect of it. But our identity is tied to our land. A lot of us believe that we were created the right where our villages originated from. The creators came down, and so that's why we're so big on caretaking our land. 80% of biodiversity around the world is caretaken by indigenous people.
Yep.
That's not just in America, that's everywhere.
Yeah.
And then capitalism seeks to come in and destroy our forests and along with that, the indigenous people are being destroyed at the same time.
Yeah. And you look at just the technological exploitation of the land and the scarification of the land through capitalism. I saw this photo one time on National Geographic, and it was like this wheel, and this wheel is like 100 feet in diameter with these giant scoops that it's like digging at the earth. It's just spinning, and it has all these scoops. It looks like a giant saw blade. Each scoop takes away the equivalent of a giant dump truck per hit, and it's got like 80 of them, and it's just like eating away at the earth. Just and you look at the amount of earth it eats and consumes versus a native person with a shovel to grow food, or even to use the dirt to build things or whatever. Just the sheer volume of how much earth is being removed for a little shiny rock, and for uranium, for whatever it is, and now for electric cars and lithium and all the lithium mining that's going on everywhere, that in and of itself, we are never going to see our land the way it was before Europeans came, because of there's entire mountains that are gone, like we could see the rest of our land that way, but the mountains that are completely gone, the voids of the earth that are now a mile wide just to get at gold or whatever it is, like that permanent scars that you could see from space.
The rivers that are diverted by dams.
Yeah.
The salmon population that's depleted up north.
Everything. The amount of concrete. The number one black market product in the world is sand. It's not weapons. It's sand. Because the amount of concrete and glass being produced for infrastructure is so great. Now they're dredging the bottom of the oceans to get silica sand. It's not just any sand, right? They just can't go to the desert. Like they need high silica sand.
And the amount of damage that dredging does to our oceans is crazy, because they're just dragging nets, and the nets drag across the ground, and it's ripping everything up. It's killing all the animals that it's coming across, is all the coral reefs that may be down there, the plants, the seaweed, just everything just gone when it does that. And it takes generations, years and years and years for that just to even start growing back.
Yeah. So part of what I've always I guess fought for, is like that awareness that our little bubble of indigeneity, we need to like make it larger and think at a global scale, because a bunch of little bubbles of indigenous culture, indigenous thought are great for cultural preservation, but not collective survival, not just of us, but of the planet.
Well, if even within our bubbles, if we all take action and we're all doing something a little bit, that goes a long way. Like with what you're doing, you have a farm, 35 acres, right?
Yeah.
Up towards Bakersfield from LA, like that mountainous area.
Yeah.
What are you doing over there?
So we got 500 oak trees to reforest, because over the last 200 years, that whole mountain range has been badly destroyed by cattle, because it was cattle ranching. Tejon, who was the quote unquote owner of thousands and thousands of acres of that land, bought all that land to create oil refineries. And he wanted to extract the oil from that whole mountain area. But when Theodore Roosevelt created the national parks system, he was forced to split it and resell back. And he had to sell it all back. He basically was not allowed to do all of that. So, but so he sold it back to individual ranchers, 100 acres at a time, and then they did cattle ranching. So he just couldn't do oil extraction. So the cattle ranching kind of ate away at all the oaks. So right now on our property, there's about 100 oaks or so, and we just got 500 oaks because we want to reforest that whole area, and hopefully bring back deer, more bear, more turkeys. A lot of the flora and fauna from the area. We've been like systematically trying to remove all the mustard, the European mustard, and that's really hard to do, so, and because it suffocates the natural grasses and the natural flowers that are up there, the indigenous flowers and plants that are there. So we're trying, as much as we can, not just on our property, but all the surrounding areas as well. So even the oak trees, we're going to put them all over the mountain as much as we can. And before we got the land, we did approach the Kitanamuk people, which is the native people of the area, to ask for permission ahead of time. And then once we got permission, we went ahead and we purchased the land. And we told them our plan, we wanted to do. We weren't going to develop on it. We're just going to build tiny homes that are sustainable and built green, quote unquote, to do minimal impact to the land, and just create a system of sustainable living through an indigenous perspective.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's pretty amazing, honestly. I wish more of us could do that. I wish I had the money to do that. That's one of my big dreams once I can end up cultivating a little bit of money from building this media company, is use that and do the same thing, but up north, and try to obtain more and more lands that have been slowly chipped away from my tribe.
Yeah. And I know there's a lot of ways of doing it, right? Like, I know there's folks that petition the government and through rights, this is our land, and all that could
land back,
like that. I get that, but there are those of us that can't do that.
I saw this article that said that Colorado is a $3 trillion. They've reaped $3 trillion from the land that they stole from natives.
I believe it, man.
Because of all the minerals in the ground that they've taken out in Colorado.
Yeah, I mean, you think about like LA, for example. LA has 21 square miles of empty land that the county owns. That's from here to Long Beach, a mile wide. That's enough to feed everybody.
Mm-hmm.
That's enough land to give back to indigenous people of this area. That's enough land to create a social structure that'll help, the houseless. That's enough to create programs, most of it goes alongside the LA River. So create programs of salmon return, turtles, like all the things that used to come up this river.
You have this big property right here in Boyle Heights, which is huge, and it's big. You have this giant building. We pulled up, and you have your own private street, basically.
Yeah.
And that's amazing. This farm. What are you doing with these lands right here?
So, I have a business. So my business, I'm a furniture maker. So I'm a furniture maker and designer. So everything I
Native
do,
Designs.
Yeah, Native Design Furniture.
Which is N8V Designs.
And so I don't have employees, so it's just me. And every now and then my boys help me, especially right now in the summer. I got them working. So I make everything by hand. I try. It's all I've ever done since I was 7 years old. So I was like, well, I really don't want to work for nobody. And then when my first son was born, I was like, I don't want to go punch a clock. I want to be here, And so, I started in the film industry, making sets and, trade shows, all this stuff. And then started moving over to furniture because it's what I really like to do. And moved into this building 3 years ago. And while I was here, there used to be a community garden here, but they were putting up this 5G tower here. So there was a protest between the people that had the garden and them, but it was all open. It wasn't fenced off. At the time, we had a different farm. We had a different farm here in East LA, and we were shutting that down as well. But I hit them up and I asked them, hey, like, I could take all your trees while they do the construction of the tower. And then that's when they told me, oh, we're not coming back. I was like, oh, really? They're like, no, we're not. And I was like, okay. So then I hit up the owners who are nonprofit, and I was like, hey, I want to, take over that garden. They're like, no, we don't know we want to do a garden because of what happened last time. We don't want protests. And I was like, look, I'll rent it from you. We'll add it to my lease, and then I'm a tenant. You're not giving it to me. And this way, I'll put it on my insurance. I'll take all liability, all responsibility for the land, and I'll never bother you with it ever again. And they're like, all right, well, how much are you willing to pay? And I was like, $20. They're like, $20? They're like, she's like, a month? I was like, yeah, $20 a month. I was like, you're not doing nothing. It's all empty. It's full of trash that they left from the construction. The gardeners are not coming back. It's just a big old empty lot. I'll give you $20 a month. And then she's like, man, you got some nerve. She calls me back 3 days later. All right, $20. So that's what I pay for the whole property, $20 a month.
Nice.
So, they pay for water and all of that. So really, but I couldn't call it a community garden. So that's why it's called El Semillero Family Farms. So, because it really.
So they own the auditorium as well.
Yeah, they own.
And then you rent this the side building where you do your the native designs, and then plus this garden that you created. Yeah. Oh, okay. What do they do with the auditorium?
They're a folklorico dance and theater company. Yeah, so that's what they do. They're a nonprofit, so they do that kind of. And them upstairs and we used to rent another building together also. So we had a good relationship. And they moved in first, and they're like, hey, you should hit them up. Maybe they'll let you rent the space. So I moved my whole shop here. So,
nice.
And I've been in business now 17 years. So it's, I've been in business a while. And it's, I've been in business 17 years, but I haven't worked in 17 years. It's like I'm doing the thing I love to do. I wake up, and this is what I like to do. Like, it doesn't feel like work. So
I feel that this definitely doesn't feel like work.
Yeah,
we're sitting here in the sun. We're kicked back in our chair.
We talking
about the stuff that matters.
Yeah, yeah. So, and teach my kids some of the, my kids, they learn to weld and carpentry and all those things, and pass some of that along so they could hopefully one day build their own home. Do the things they do. So I mean, they're going to choose whatever path they choose.
So you're giving back to the local community right here in Boyle Heights?
Yeah, so we do give classes, carpentry and welding classes. We'll do classes on how to raise chickens, farming classes, water reclamation, cooking classes. We do breastfeeding. We have other people that come in and give classes like breastfeeding classes, child rearing classes, things like that. So there's things that we still, and everything is free. So we don't charge. And it's we kind of, I feel like I have a responsibility. It doesn't cost me anything to teach somebody to raise chickens. The chickens themselves, they help me. Like, it sounds corny, but they help me emotionally.
Yeah.
I'll sit down under the shade with a chicken in my hand, be comfortable.
Chickens are a lot more friendly than you think.
Oh, chickens are so friendly. So, plus we get eggs out of them. I don't have to buy eggs ever again. I don't kill the chickens because my son doesn't let me, but, I'll take, we'll take people out on hunting expeditions to teach them how to hunt, how to process deer and other animals as well.
And you do that on your land up there.
So we do bow hunting. So,
oh, sick.
yeah, so
Yeah.
we go up there, we do bow hunting, there's wild boar. So, and then up on the land, we also take excursions of people and do other things there. So, how to build an adobe, how to create sustainable living systems and things like that. And again, everything we do is free. So um, I'm not a person that feels like, well, I learned all this and I should charge for what I know. I think it's my responsibility that, I can't take any of it with me when I die. So I could just leave behind, as much as I can. So I think if people could learn to hunt, build a house, grow food, raise chickens, like that, those are basic things that I think we should all know how to do. And I don't think we should pay for that,
Yeah.
for me.
There's a one thing I wanted you to touch on that I heard you mention before we started recording, and that was uh, something about your son obtaining a doctorate degree and how he's able to do that.
So my son's 17. He wants to go to UNAM, which is Universidad Autónoma de Mexico in Mexico City. And he wants to get his doctorate in Mesoamerican anthropology. To In his head, he's like, I'm tired of white people deciding who we are. We need our people to go in and write our own history and our own stories. Um, so that's his kind of reason for going. But UNAM has Mexico actually has a program, or part of the system, education system, is that if you have a family member, uh, ancestor who fought in the Mexican Revolution, you get to go to university for free, all the way to a doctorate level. So he's gonna get to go there for free because through his mom's side, he has that ability. Somebody fought for Mexican land rights, and because of that ancestor, now my son is gonna go and educate himself to get indigenous rights.
See,
So
that's smart. Native people go to college.
yeah, so like a great grandfather fought for land rights, and now he's gonna fight for the same rights. So,
Nice.
So I think, and either way, he'd be able to do it because of me. I was born in Mexico, so if you have a parent who's born in Mexico, your child has the rights to university in Mexico as well.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing.
So my other son, if he wanted to go, he would go.
What's your plan for the future? What does the future look like?
Well, I think I spent 40 years fighting against things. I'm going to spend the next 40 years fighting for. I just spent 40 years fighting fighting for things I'm against, and I'm going to spend fighting for things that I'm for. So, I fought, and in the process, you do both, right? So, but now it's more focused on creating more opportunities, having land and getting people to go up there and learn how to do these processes at no cost. All it takes is get your butt up there. The sustainable living, get people to live in the most sustainable way so as to not have a large carbon footprint. Teach people how to be self-reliant, autonomous, and hopefully create a little dent in the grand scheme of things, so we don't forget who we are and where we come from.
Well, I appreciate you so much for welcoming here to your home, your property, your farm. It's been a great conversation. I feel like I've learned a lot. I learn more and more every time I speak to someone new, and you provided a perspective I didn't even think about. So that was amazing. I appreciate you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.